All right, we are live and welcome everyone to Rusch Academy, which is our digital learning platform. And it's all here to help you expand and elevate your human performance. And we have classes on topics like gravel riding. We have webinars focused on topics like tonight, motivation or breathing. And we have a free content library. And the whole goal of Rusch Academy is to really provide you with insights and education from myself and my network of high performing specialists and people who work in the human performance world. So Rusch Academy is made possible by Live and Giant Bicycles, NV Composites, Garmin, and Basecamp. So I'll just intro myself for those of you who don't know me. I am Rebecca Rusch, also known as the Queen of Pain. I've been an athlete my entire life, world-class athlete with some world championships in multiple endurance sports, from running to cross-country skiing, cycling, riverboarding the Grand Canyon, a bunch of cool adventures. I'm in the mountain bike and gravel Hall of Fame, 24-hour solo mountain bike world champion 3 times, Leadville champion 4 times, unbound gravel, won all those distances multiple times. And I'm the founder of Rebecca's Private Idaho, Be Good Foundation. I've done some cool adventures with Coach Tim alongside here on the Iditarod Trail in Alaska. I'm also an author and Emmy Award winner. And as I said, lifelong endurance athlete and ultra endurance athlete. And for tonight's topic of motivation, I could think of no one better than my very own coach, Tim Cusick, to join us to really kind of share his experience as well. Because between both of us, we have decades and decades, not quite 100 years, but a lot of decades of experience in what it's like to try to stay motivated, get motivated, lose it, bring it back again. And so welcome, Tim. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
That's kind of a tough act to follow, but sure. I've been a professional coach for over 20 years. I've had the luxury of working with some amazing professional athletes like you. I've won 4 world championships, 18 national championships, have a couple of world best records, world best, been Olympic Games coach, and I've had numerous victories in multiple disciplines within the sport. So I've had the luxury of just working at a high level with some amazing people. I'm also the Training Peaks WKO product leader. So I have a deep background in data analytics, number science, physiology, things like that. And that background also gives me access to big data, a lot of information, and some kind of unique analytics. And finally, I'm an educator. I'm a USA Cycling Summit presenter. I'm the Training Peaks University presenter, and I am author of Training with WKO, all the online education stuff like that that's there. So I did have a couple of different hats in that way. They're all under the big coach hat, but I enjoy some other things, data, science, being a nerd, as Rebecca will tell you, and all that stuff.
The lovable nerd and the founder of Basecamp Training, which I'm part of, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But for tonight, Tim and I, we have a really good style that we call Science and Stoke. He's a lot smarter than I am in things like technology and training and the physiology of coaching athletes for decades. And I am more lifestyle experience of, tried and true things that I've used for decades in my own experience. So tonight we are going to really get into the holy grail of motivation, that like chalice that we all want to drink of. And like, once you get it, then it seems like it's gone again. So we're really going to dig into what is motivation, how it works. And our goal for this, the output goal that we want to leave you with, is to really give you the tools to learn how to build your very personal, very tuned to you motivation menu. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, what that means, but that's what you're going to leave tonight with. And as we said in the chat, there is a Google sheet that you can download that's kind of a worksheet, and I do suggest that you maybe print that right now and keep it next to you while you're listening, so you can jot down ideas, because that's going to be a little bit of homework from the class. So print that out. This is what it looks like. And then also we're going to take questions. That's the nice thing about a live webinar. So try to use the Q&A box instead of the chat box. You can definitely chat amongst yourselves in the chat box, but we'll be monitoring Q&A. We'll look at that throughout the webinar. We'll get to them either during or some of them after. And if we don't get to all your questions, I promise to you is that we're going to answer them all via social media and in the next few days, in the coming weeks, so that you get all of your questions answered. Because this is a rich, deep topic that we're just like really going to get into. But there's a lot to talk about. So we're pretty excited about tonight. All right, so our agenda for tonight: motivation defined, your steps to building your motivational menu, and then some motivational habits that we've used, that Tim's seen his athletes use. So what we're going to do first is define what is motivation. So Coach Tim, you want to get into that for us?
Sure. So I have some unique approaches towards motivation. We're going to talk about it a little bit tonight. Obviously, as a coach, I think one of the things that's happened when you say coaching in today's world, particularly in endurance sports, and the way we have, connections, because we think about somebody who writes a training plan. That's what endurance athletes tends to think. Go out and run for an hour, ride your bike for 3 hours, whatever that is. Where the reality is coaching goes beyond that. Coaching really is that coach athlete maximization relationship. Maximization, optimization. How do we achieve peak performances? And it goes way beyond just having a training plan. And that means you have to be able to start and have basic understanding. So motivation needs to be defined before we can master it, learn it, and get to the holy grail, as Rebecca said. So one, I just love to start with simple dictionary-like definitions. So I picked two of my favorites out from online. One, the reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. And the second one is the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. And why I like these two is it shows the core of where motivation can be a tool for an athlete and where it can actually be a barrier. It is something that's a great word. We love to associate it with inspiration. We love to associate it with aspiration. But motivation really has to translate into behavior. It's got to be something that you take off this, rah, I'm ready to go, right? And be able to translate it into change, translate it into behavior, translate it into action, translate it into discipline, and then continue to reinvigorate those actions through the approach of motivation, which we're going to get into today.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. You've got acting, doing, behaving, like they're action. It's an action word. And I will just touch on the point that we're going to be mostly talking through the lens of cycling and endurance sport, but these tools are for anything, for writing a thesis, for, mowing your lawn, whatever it might be.
So if you're doing your homework right now, take notes. We're going to give you shortcuts. I like it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. So motivation is an action word. You've got to actually do something. All right, so where does motivation come from? I wanted to dive a little bit into this because Tim, as a coach, you train me and you train my physiology. You give me workouts to do, but you're also really training a behavior or a brain or what we're actually doing. And our actions, as Tim said in the definition of motivation, our actions and our behavior, where does that come from? It actually comes from your brain first. And so a big part of any sort of motivational plan or any training plan or goal setting is, where does motivation come from? And the neurochemistry of reward, so the brain doesn't really care what it is that is motivating you or driving you. The brain doesn't care. It just releases chemicals based on, like Tim said in his motivation definition, the brain releases chemicals based on what you do. So an action that you take releases this wonderful cocktail of things that will help you stay motivated. And I listed here the brain's major pleasure chemicals. There's 6 of them. And we've all heard a lot of these words, but we'll just touch on them a little bit, because what's really motivating for me, if I understand why something's happening or how something's happening, then I kind of want to do it. And so the brain's major pleasure chemicals, dopamine, that is like your reward chemical. Like you get an A+, a gold star on your paper, ding, your brain is going to release a little bit of chemical, a little bit of dopamine that makes you feel good. It's why we like gold stars. It's why we have our training peaks and the little green squares. So dopamine is a pleasure, is a reward. Oxytocin is trust, love, friendship. So that's like you're riding with your friend, you're having a good time because you're there together. That's oxytocin saying, wow, I really like having my friend with me. Norepinephrine, that's energy, alertness. It's kind of the feeling of drinking a cup of coffee or a Red Bull, but you can get that from sprinting, or if a bear's chasing you, you're gonna get some of that kind of stuff that instantly your chemical in your brain is going, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. Serotonin, calm, peace. We get that when we listen to music. We get that when we do deep breathing exercises or breathe through our nose. You are releasing chemicals in your brain. Endorphins, painkillers. We all know that feeling of like you're going super hard, you feel no pain, you're sprinting to that finish line, you've got endorphins going, and you don't feel that you like twisted your ankle or something until after you finish and you've finished the race. That's endorphin. And anandamide is euphoria, happiness. So the cool thing about runner's high or flow is that your body will mix all these chemicals into this really cool cocktail. So you don't just get one. A lot of times you're getting 2 or 3 or 4, or if you're in flow state, you're getting all 6 of these things at the same time. So for me, it's really important to understand that, because like Tim said, the definition of motivation is what do you do? What is your action? And then your brain is going to help you by going, oh, hell yeah, do more of this or do less of that. So we're not going to get too far into the brain chemicals, but I just wanted to touch on that so that you can understand that your interventions, the actions that you take, release really, really powerful chemicals. And once you release those, the motivation gets easier.
Couldn't agree more. So, what's amazing here, right? All the best things start simple, meaning we started with a simple definition. We look at this fact, we define motivation. Here's what it is. We talk about a couple of topics within it. It's behavioral, it's action, it's this. We now understand that this simple thing is so chemically wired. Like, where does it really come from? It is a chemical response that occurs within your body that are motivation amplifiers, motivation rewards, motivation enablers. So now that you know what it is, and now that you know where it comes from, I'm about to give you the secret, the absolute secret. Unlock it. Here comes the Holy Grail. One simple slide. The next slide I'm going to show you. Here it all comes. The secret according to Tim. Because this is my philosophy about motivation. And it actually brings a lot of raised eyebrows. And I have to defend this a lot until I explain. So as a coach, when I bring in athletes and they're like, hey, coach, I want to work with you. You're going to motivate me to be a world champ. You're going to motivate me to that. And I always say, wait a minute. My role is not to motivate you. I can't. As a matter of fact, my role is to build the best environment for your self-motivation to flourish. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is motivation is something that starts in you. And if you read a book about motivation, or you attend a course with us about motivation, we tend to externalize motivation. You hear this all the time, motivate me. These things motivate me. Honestly, when the rubber meets the road, when shit gets real, you are the only one that's going to matter. And it's something that has to come from you. And it's something that you have to own. It's something you have to take responsibility for. And it's something you need to practice, train, develop, and build at all given times, just like your physical fitness, right? No one's going to give you a magic fitness. I was going to say a fitness pill, but that can kind of be done, but don't do that. But no one's going to give you a magic motivation. You have to build a system of getting there, a plan. You have to work and take actions to achieving that. And you have to keep practicing. Once you get motivated, Rebecca, when you get motivated, do you always stay motivated?
No, I think a really good example is when I came to you, I was pretty motivated to tackle winter bike packing expeditions. I was really going into a new realm and started working with Tim, and I was pretty motivated. I was stoked to have a new coach, and I was ready to rock. We've been working together a number of years, and actually, full transparency, this year is the first time since I've known Tim where I haven't been motivated, or one of the first times. It's been an ebb and a flow. And we've spent almost a whole year of Tim being like, well, I can provide the environment, the support, but ultimately it's been me who's had to sort of pull myself up with my toolkit. But yeah, motivation is something just like your fitness that you've got to always keep working on.
It ebbs and flows. So one of the key takeaways, you can put this right on top of your note page. I am responsible for my motivation. Just put it right up there, right? Because if you take that, you'll be a better athlete. And in my opinion, you'll be a better person. You'll be more successful at the things you do. It all comes from you. But let's go a little deeper about this motivation and start to talk about the power of motivation, because I think this is the part, as you achieve that, or as you assume that responsibility, and and I'm not saying you don't, a lot of people do take it as responsibility. There's two ways I like to explain this, two words we're going to talk about: way power and willpower. And these are the powers of motivation. This is the battle, like all things in life are battle. Like we're always kind of ebbing and flowing, pushing back and forth, yin and yang of who we are. Way power, the way I define way power, that is the belief in the path forward, confidence in the plan, and the resources that you have access to execute it. A lot of people are highly motivated by way power. And way power might be, hey, I hire a world-class coach and he writes me a great training plan. And when I look at that training plan, I'm like, wow, bam, this is it. This is the secret I've been looking for. If I just do this plan, I'm going to be the greatest athlete ever. I'm going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to win world championships, all that stuff. That's way power. And that's the motivation of way power. That's part of the game, right? I always give it as an example. I'm going to go on a diet. You hire a nutritionist or you buy a new diet program and they write you the perfect food program. And you're like, that's it. I'm going to lose my 10, 20 pounds, whatever it is. And you're like, yes, I'm now motivated. But like all yin and yang things, right? There's another side of way power. There's willpower. And willpower is the discipline in choosing goal-related behavior. This is where the action, and remember what motivation really is. It's behavior, it's an action, it's a do something. Willpower is the action, the discipline in choosing goal-related behaviors or goal-related actions. So when you think about this reality, right, when you think about your motivation, understand that there's always, sometimes it's additive. Your way power and willpower are working together and you're hyper motivated. But probably more often than not, to be honest with you, they're battling it out a little bit. Like sometimes you don't have the perfect plan or you can't find, remember, way power is also about the right resources. You don't have the right coach, you don't have the right program, you're getting bad guidance or whatever it is, even though your willpower is high. And sometimes you have all the right guidance and maybe your willpower isn't so good either, right? So these are always working sort of sometimes together, but more often apart. So motivation, when we talk about the role, we put that back under this big term. Motivation is the engine behind accomplishing the behavior necessary to connect your way power to your willpower. And the way these two battle is, it's kind of funny. Rebecca and I have talked about this a bunch. The gap in here is what I call the knowing to doing gap. You know you should be doing it, right? You have identified the right behaviors, but the willpower to actually elicit behavior, change, activity, action, that isn't as easy as we like to say. Yeah. So when I get a new athlete, I give them my motivation speech. I can't motivate you. You need to motivate yourself. But then I do need to figure out the environment that motivates them. My first assessment is their way power, willpower, and I want to know how big that gap is. I have people come to me all the time and say, hey, Coach Tim, I want to be a professional rider. I can do, 5.5 watts per kilogram. And I know I can make the world tour if I, in a year or two of training with you. But then I watch their habits. And in like 2 weeks, I'm like, nah, you probably don't have it. Not without that. And don't get me wrong, that can be coached up. But that moment, I'm like, wow, this athlete needs a lot more willpower. Mm-hmm. So when we look at that, I look at 5 elements of motivation, of which we're going to talk about 3 tonight. And that's why I'm dangling. There's 2 other secret ones out there. So we bring you back for part 2 someday.
These are big ones, though. These are pretty big ones.
These are the core ones, right? These are the core ones. These are because remember, I'm looking at the athlete. I'm looking at their big picture. I'm not going to motivate them. Don't get me wrong. I want to get them in an environment where they do their greatest, but they have to find their own motivation. I just mature it. I matriculate it. But the elements I'm looking at when I'm assessing that athlete, when I'm trying to understand way power, willpower, 1, I want to understand confidence. And what confidence confidence is, or I'll read it like I wrote. Sometimes reading is actually the best answer. To have confidence means you believe in your ability to mobilize you and your resources. Nobody can do it alone. It takes a community, it takes a village, right? So it's confidence to mobilize you and your resources to achieve your goal. Before you start down the path of any big goal, any practicing of motivation, you need confidence. If you don't believe you can get there, if you don't believe you can mobilize yourself and your resources, that's step one. Everything else fails. You can't build upon that. You need the confidence, the energy to go forward. Two is hope. And hope means you see the path to obtain your goals and have the willpower to follow your path. That is so important. With confidence, confidence leads to hope. And okay, if you get over the confidence step, then we have to talk about the hope. And that's an important one. I'm going to talk about each one of these deeper as part of your motivational menu when we get there. And finally, you need optimism. Optimism, and this is a strange way to say it. It was so funny. And this is where, Rebecca's so smart at this stuff. She's been doing it for so many years. When we were having this discussion about specifics, I remember originally saying my definition of optimism, and it was like, wow, that does, like, wow, that resonates. Not to put it on the spot. Optimism is believing positive events tend to happen because of internal reasons, and bad events or bad things happen because of external reasons. And the reason why that reads a little odd, it's like, well, wait a minute, Tim, I get the internal part, right? Like I'm making optimism. Good things happen to me because I go out and I earn them. I work for them. I don't get lucky. I put myself in the path of luck. I work hard every day. But part of optimism is the ability to be resilient against negative impacts and say, you know what, that wasn't me. That doesn't mean sometimes you go, yeah, I screwed that one up, but then you move on. You don't own it. You don't, you don't become what I would say, you don't lose the ability to reframe it. So it's like, if you just believe, well, bad things, everything bad happens to me because I'm bad, I'm me, that's killer of optimism.
Yeah.
So to me, the elements are, you have confidence, confidence leads to hope, hope needs to lead to optimism. But the reality is these elements can be self-defined, learned, practiced, built, and enhanced. Mm-hmm. And what I would tell you more importantly is you need to always be working on them. It is not something like, wow, I've gotten there. I'm at the top of the mountain. I never have to rethink my confidence or my optimism. If you look at look at Rebecca's resume, it was so broad of events and things she's done. Imagine how many times she's gone through her version of this cycle, remotivating, building confidence. If you're going from being a rock climber to eventually being a world champion mountain biker, right? You have to rebuild that confidence a lot. Can I marshal those resources? Can I find the right coach? Can I find the right plan? Do I know what a mountain bike is? Can I figure out how to pedal one? It's all kinds of things. So that elements, putting these keys together, that's the fundamental, that's the basis of what we grow motivation out of. Anything to add with that, Rebecca?
No, it's just awesome. It's awesome. I think you might be sitting here going, yeah, well, I don't have confidence. I don't have hope. I don't have optimism. So what do I do now? So that's what we're going to dive into.
You have slide control back, so you can go to the next slide.
Right, here we go. So what do you do? Great. Tim said to have confidence, motivation, or have confidence, optimism, but I don't have those. So this is where we're going to get into how to build your motivational menu. And this is kind of a term or your motivation menu. And this is kind of a term that I came up with, and you can sort of like imagine yourself right now, you're in Las Vegas at one of those like huge buffet lines with hundreds of people. And as far as you can see, there's food down the aisle, and there's everything you can think of from every country in the world. And this is sort of how I think about motivation, is that you need tools, you need a lot of stuff to build confidence, hope, and optimism. So on this giant buffet with all the foods around the world, you can choose anything you want. But what tastes good on one day, doesn't taste good on another day. Maybe like the scalloped potatoes are super awesome for you on Monday, but on Tuesday, you want to go for the lemon bars or the pineapple upside down cake, and you have a different taste, you have a different flavor. And so I think of motivation in this way, is that you've got to build all these tools with a huge variety, because as Tim said, nothing's going to work from year to year over and over and over again. Nothing is going to be the same from one day to the next. And then you also need to, so you need a lot of variety, and then you need to stack. And so this, what I mean by stacking, and this is for any sort of oriented goal, is you need a lot of things to choose from, and then you need to stack a whole bunch of things on your plate. So if you think of the visual of the menu of how can you build up that giant buffet for yourself so that you don't have single source nutrition, because that doesn't work. You need lots of things, and you need to put them all together, and that your appetite changes. So like I said, these are key for any performance goal of any kind. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about the motivational menu, or the motivation menu. So as we said, when you leave this evening, you're going to have a toolkit, and you're going to build your own menu. Because my menu is not the same as your menu, and what Tim wants to eat, what I want to eat, what I eat on Tuesdays versus Fridays, it's all different. So step one, before the menu and building the menu, we'll get into that. I just wanted to define the menu. So step one really is identifying your why and selecting an aligning goal. So everyone talks about it. The why has kind of been like I don't know, a little bit of a catchphrase lately, but why are you here? Why did you even sign up for this webinar? Why are you listening to us talk? And so understanding sort of your core reason is the first step. And again, that is going to change. What my why was when I was 25 years old is different now for me. And then, so choosing your why. And why are you here? Are you here because you want to challenge yourself? Are you here because you want to be a good example for your children? Are you here because you want to lose weight? Are you here because you want to crush your neighbor and beat them in the Tuesday night sprints? Whatever it is, choose your why you're here, and then your aligning goals. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of some whys of some events that I've done recently to just kind of give you a framework to build yours. So the first two pictures there that are obviously in a warm climate that you can see, that's a ride I did in 2015. I rode the entire length of the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And the why I wanted to do it, I wanted to go to the place where my dad's plane was shot down during the Vietnam War. I wanted to answer questions about his death, myself. I wanted to see the culture. I wanted to learn the history of the place, and unknown terrain. That was my why. We ended up making a film about it, and it won an Emmy Award. I did not go to make a film. That was not my why. My why was to really connect with my family and do a really big exploratory adventure. And the aligning goal for that why, to discover myself in a culture and a little bit more about my dad, was to set the goal of riding the entire length of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So the why was the discovery. The goal was riding the length of the trail, and that was extremely motivating to have an aligned why and a very specific goal that matched that. So on the flip side, the cold looking pictures that you see
totally
there,
different pictures.
and this is another why, another goal. Again, we're going to keep reinforcing that this activity keeps happening all the time. And so in 2018, I think it was, or yeah, I think 2018. I basically, or no, 2015, I started doing winter bike expeditions here in Idaho, and then eventually in Alaska, which are the pictures that you see there. And the why was, I was feeling like maybe I was this washed up athlete who could never perform again, who could never hit any really hard goals. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could go do the biggest, hardest, scariest thing that I still had what it takes to go do something really committing. And I wanted to test myself. I wanted to feel strong again. I wanted to feel motivated again. I wanted to feel like that I still had it. And so I picked the scariest thing I could think of, which is being in a cold environment. I'm not good in the cold. I don't like the cold. And so I chose a very committing environment to go do something totally new for me. And that was to go the aligning goal that went with, I want to prove that I still have what it takes, that I'm not done. And the aligning goal was, I'm going to go ride the Iditarod Trail in Alaska. It scares the bejesus out of me. I don't think I can do it. I don't have the skills for it, but that was my aligning goal to really prove to myself that I did have what it takes. And fear was a big motivator there because I didn't want to freeze to death. But that's just an example of define your why and select a goal that goes with it. It's a two-part thing, because you can say, I want to be really fit. I want to do this. I want to do that. Or this is my why. I'm doing this because of this reason. But then you need a goal that actually reinforces that, because then that goes back to the motivation of, like Tim's definition, motivation is action. So I can say, I want to discover if I still have what it takes as an athlete. That would be a great why. But if I didn't align it with a goal of go ride the Iditarod Trail, it's just way power and not willpower. It's just lip service versus action. So defining your why and selecting a goal. I can't do this for you. Tim can't do this for you. And like I said, it's going to change over the course of your life and your career. So how do you get there? How do you define your why? And people always, I've ridden with people, I have some teammates that I ride with, like a friend of mine was signing up for this big gnarly race. And I said, well, why are you going and doing it? And she said, I don't know. I was like, well, maybe you should figure that out first, because she had this big gnarly goal, and I think in her heart, she knew why, she just hadn't defined it. So here is some of your homework exercise to define why are you here? Why are you doing the things that you're going to do? So it starts with introspection and self-evaluation. This is a good place where a journal, taking notes, writing things down really helps to figure out. And again, it's changing all the time, but paying attention to, when people ask me, why did you choose to do this or that or the other? Paying attention to the things that trigger you, whether it's trigger you with excitement, trigger you with a little bit of trepidation or anticipation, something that makes your hands sweat. So thinking of things, and this is some of your homework, what are you scared of? I was scared of the cold. And I'm like, okay, then maybe I need to go there to learn. I'm some examples. I'm scared of losing mobility. I'm scared of not being able to be active my whole life. That's a big why for me, is I want to be able to move until the day I die. And so that's a big motivator for me. What are you curious about? Curiosity is one of our largest motivators, and this is scientifically proven. Stephen Kotler is a good friend of mine. He runs the Flow Research Collective, and one of our biggest and simplest drivers is curiosity. Something as simple as like, what does it look like over that next mountain? Could I ride over that hill? Could I make it? Curiosity is a very big motivator. So if you're like, I wonder what it's like to ride in Europe. I wonder what Croatia's like. I wonder what Idaho's like. I wonder what's around the next corner. It's that little kid in you who are on your little bike, and when you rode past the end of your block and you got to see what was the next thing, that's a very potent driver for us at any age. So writing down things of what makes you scared, which I look at as anticipation, excitement. What are you curious about? What do you value? Is it family time? Is it travel? Is it seeing a beautiful vista? Is it beating Tim, up the next climb?
That's easy.
There's a lot of different ones. And so this is going to be this kind of self-reflection, but this is the first step, defining your why. And it starts again with some journaling, some writing down, but think about emotions. And that's what brings up what's important to you. So Tim, do you have a couple like examples of what you're scared of, curious, or how do you define your why?
I was going to say something in the first and second. It's actually going to be even more clear on the next slide. And you do this so well, Rebecca, and I give kudos for you. And I think people should be thinking about it. You understand what she did on her first slide? She said, you need to define your why and then pick a goal. That order is so important to do it that way. But yet most of us do it in reverse, don't we? We say, oh, I see something. That's cool. I want that to be my goal. And then you can never define the why well, and you end up with way power versus willpower battles all the time. If you entrench in your why first and then find a goal that aligns with that, your way power willpower battle will not be that hard. So I'm going to give you a little gut test, and then I'm going to answer a specific question. If you have a goal right now and you're like, next year I want to do Unbound, RPI, whatever it is, right? Be a 2-year-old to yourself. And you know what a 2-year-old, if you ever have one, does one? Why, right? Say it out loud after the session. My goal is to do this, to go to Unbound. And then you say, oh, okay, well, that's a big challenge. And then after this meeting, go, well, why? Well, it seems like everybody else is doing it. Then ask yourself why 2 more times. And if your answers can't go deeper, you have the wrong goal.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe something like, a more community-based event like RPI or something like might be your game, or maybe something different is your game. But if you can't define that why, if you can't reverse engineer and clearly go why, and each one's deeper, which Rebecca is so well pointing out for you here. I was a racer for years. I still ride my bike a lot, stuff like that. I have a fear of failure. Like, I am one of those people that I am a win or go home person, which is cool when you say it that way, but that often disguises your a fear of failure. Like, I have to prepare perfectly. I have to be in a scenario where I feel super well prepared, because I am one, it's Ricky Bobby, right? It's right. If you ain't first, you're last. That's just how I think about things. So I constantly have to fight that fear. I have to reframe, because that's very destructive when you start to think about it. What am I curious about? I am very intrinsically motivated. So I'm curious how, like, I am the ultimate, as a coach, my greatest experimental lab is me. Like, I test things out, like a whole annual training plan. I'm going to test that out for myself for a year. I have incredible patience. So I'm curious about pushing the limits. Mm-hmm. What is optimization? I love to learn. I love knowledge. I'm very good at learning. I absorb knowledge really fast, and I've always been able to do that. And it's just like, but part of it is I'm always doing that. It's practice. So anything in that direction is curious to me. So it's finding those things and evolving in it. So my goals, I want events that force me to prepare amazingly, that I can tackle my fear of failing and just say, this is going to be something I can overcome. So it's all the same, but you have to do that why first. Really come to grips with why, and then be like, oh, here's my big goal that's aligned with that.
Yeah, that's super awesome points, Tim. And they're all going to be different. And again, hone in on the emotion, and that picture there in the dark there, that's a good example of, that's the first year we did the Giddy Up Challenge. It was March or May of the pandemic. We had just started, lockdown and all this kind of stuff. I'd come back from Alaska and had an amazing race, and Tim was my coach, and he's like, what is it going to take for you to, and I just stopped training. I think, like all of us, we had a big reaction to what was going on in the whole entire world. And like, what are we going to do? What happens with our jobs? We can't go outside. What can we do? And Tim was like, what's it going to take for you to get training again? And I just said, I don't know. I have no purpose. I have no goal. I have nothing to shoot for. And we actually we designed this challenge, the Giddy Up Challenge, to actually fundraise for COVID relief, and set up an Everesting challenge that people could do digitally anywhere. And I did a ride in my home turf, and I said, I need a goal, because what I really valued was my fitness and still moving. And with all the typical things of races and things taken away, I needed to replace what I valued, which was having something to shoot for and feeling confident in myself. So I had to design a goal actually specifically for that need of what I valued. So that was my Everesting there at home on Trail Creek Summit. But it came from defining, well, we're just all sitting around in the pandemic, not knowing what to do. And so Tim was really valuable in being like, okay, well, what's it going to take? And we went through that process together. All right, so we're going to talk a bit about expanding your why and how things motivate you. So we talked about how the brain work, and we're going to go a little back to the brain. So science split our psychological drivers into two categories, and it's distinct. There are not very topics. You can see them listed here. These are scientifically proven and listed for motivators for us, like drivers for people. What drives somebody's brain to want to do something? Like Tim said, motivation is an action word, to do something. And so intrinsic drivers are all things that happen, or excuse me, extrinsic drivers are things that happen on the outside. And the ones that the scientists have defined are money, fame, sex, and power. And you might think, okay, I'm not riding my bike or setting that because I want any of those things, or maybe a few of those things, but not all of them. But really you can frame them in that they are the things that we need to survive. Your brain is still basically a cave person. And so the initial motivators are, I need food, I need shelter, I need safety. And money is something that like can buy those things, can buy me a house to live in, can get food on the table, can take care of my family. So those are some extrinsic drivers, and those come first, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You first have to take care of the basics of like, am I going to survive? If you go back to like living in a cave, am I going to survive? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to defend myself against the person who's trying to take my food away from me? So it's kind of primal. That's not to say people in modern days aren't motivated by those things, because they are, but your brain is reacting in a primal sort of way, in that I need these things first. And there's a really interesting study that they did, again, with Stephen Kotler cited this, and they were looking at the motivator of money, because everyone says, yeah, I'm motivated by money. Everyone wants money. And they did a study that was really interesting. It said people are hyper motivated by money up until they made about $75,000 a year. And then after that point, that was their extrinsic driver. They were super motivated, work hard, get a job, do 3 jobs. And then once they hit that threshold of a like okay amount to be safe and live on, money no longer became their primary driver. It went to something else. And so this is an interesting way of thinking about what are your extrinsic drivers. And for me, I put that picture of me like winning Leadville, because for much of my career, I'm a professional athlete. Contracts are year to year. I need to win races in order to keep doing my job, in order to keep putting money on the table and keep doing what I love. And so my motivation for sight at certain periods of my career were very different. Or power, I need to be able to be the best in order to sustain what I'm doing. You flip over to intrinsic motivators, and obviously intrinsic drivers, those are things that come from the inside. We already talked about curiosity is amazing motivator or driver, passion, meaning, mastery, autonomy. And I didn't make these things up. Again, they're scientifically proven. So mastery, like the feeling of like a job really well done. You're like, oh, I did that. I mastered that. Ding, there's some neurochemicals that are released in your brain exactly when that happens. Meaning, working towards something altruistic, working towards something a little bigger than yourself. Ding, there's neurochemicals that are released when you're doing that. Autonomy, feeling like you can take care of yourself and you've got stuff handled. Those things are really big intrinsic drivers. They come from the inside. Passion, I want to be a good parent for my kids. I want to choose a good example. So and one is not better than the other. We actually need them all, both. I'm not judging intrinsic versus extrinsic. So when you think about building your motivation menu, obviously you need the baseline first, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need food, shelter, safety, money, fame, sex, power. You need all that on the inside or on the outside. And then you start to evolve and move to the inside. But you're still gonna reach to both sides. Competition is very motivating. It's why we sign up for events. And you say, oh, I'm going to be intrinsically motivated all the time. I'm just going to do all the great things. But yet you really want to beat that person that's in front of you. And that is extrinsic, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's not a judgment. It's just showing the factors and knowing that we're all motivated by both things. Keeping track of your stuff on a Garmin and recording it. That's extrinsic, and it's very motivating to see those little check marks line up in your training program. So I want you to kind of understand them. And as we build our motivation menu, we're going to be pulling from both intrinsic and extrinsic, and you need all of them. Again, you need that gigantic buffet that's as big as you can make it. All right, so we're going to go back now to your like, okay, we need confidence, hope, and optimism. So Tim, what do we do now?
Well, I mean, it's great. So we started out and you have this on your worksheet. Don't forget, you can copy that worksheet and start your own. You can be following along with notes with us right now. Hopefully this will give you room to start really going back and think about your why. Here's one of the things I'll tell you about, and we almost didn't put a worksheet out. Rebecca and I talked about it all afternoon. Creating a motivation menu, having a goal, understanding your whys, having a goal, and then connecting all these things like motivation capital. It's not like, oh, there's 4 blocks and 2 arrows, and if you just write the word in each one and they all look exactly the same. It really takes you time. You need to spend some time thinking about these things and then rethinking. And you'd be surprised though, if you put time into motivation, what you get out of it. Like, don't rush to a why and a goal. It shouldn't be like everything else you do, like you're going to do your taxes. Okay, I'm going to get that done in an hour here and I'm going to write out all the numbers. It doesn't work that way. Start. So now you have your,
like Tim said, we're developing skills just like you're training. And so now he's going to dive a little into, well, how do I develop these skills? How do I actually develop this as part of my training, my ongoing training?
Okay. So you have your why and your goal. Now we need to think about your motivational capital. And the reality is each one of these things can be learned in practice. Like you could just build these within you. So let's dive into them individually and just give some highlights, some points as you begin to do this. So let's start with confidence, right? And 2 things. Remember, I'm always thinking way power, willpower. There's always the yin and the yang of things, right? So remember, that's to have confidence means you believe in your ability to mobilize you and your resources. So when you begin to think about, all right, I need confidence, you write this on your paper. This is, I'm going to score my motivational capital. How much motivational capital do I have in the bank? The first thing you do, just like you're looking at your bank account, is what have you already done to achieve your goal? And this sounds so simple, but I see people make this mistake all the time. I see people make this mistake with RPI, and I know we have base campers on this group. This is just my honest feedback. I've done the French fry and I'm maybe thinking about stepping up for the baked potato, but man, I'd love to do the whole Megillah, do the whole stage race, but I just can't. That's just so hard. I just can't. If you were to stop and think, well, gee, wait a minute, let me see where I'm at today. Let me to work on my confidence capital. So what have I already done to help towards my goal? I've spent a year training seriously in base camp. I've gone to RPI and I performed the 50-mile race. I went up a really big hill. I finished the race. I did this. We tend to have this thing in our brain that's a constant reset. We always want to start from 0. So as you think about your motivational capital and you're kicking around, remember, you have your why and your goal beginning to materialize in front of you, and you're saying, wow, can I do this? Confidence starts it out. Give yourself credit for what you already have in the bank. What capital do you have in your motivational bank already? Start by writing that out. This is what I've already done. I've done 3 other events. I did okay. Because you're going to forget that at the moment when you're crowded with fear and lack of confidence in the planning.
A little tip here is people are always really like critical of themselves. Like one thing you can put on your list, you're here listening to this webinar. And just a little tactic I use super briefly is when I'm feeling like I don't have a lot of confidence. I'm not getting it, is I pretend like I put myself in the third person and I pretend like I'm talking to a friend of mine who has the same situation. And I'd be like, well, look, you've already done this, you've already done this, you've already done this, you've already done this. So even if you can't speak kindly to yourself, imagine your best friend and talk to them in that way and start your list of, look, you've already done all these things. And to Tim's point, you'll find there are things you've already done that are moving you towards where you want to be.
And that helps you believe in your ability.
Mhm.
Then you ask yourself, what resources can you mobilize? So many people set a goal and they're like, oh, here's the things I might need to do, but you don't think about it from resource. If we know we have resources, that builds confidence. One of the greatest things I see in base camp happen all the time. I'm just telling you, people have the confidence because they're surrounded by a community that help them see these things. And there's resources ever. I have a nutrition question, bam, strength question, bam, coach question. There's every event. You want to do any event, somebody's done it in base camp, right? So you have to think about, where am I truly starting out? And Rebecca's point is awesome. Without all that self beat down and start again from zero. And then how do I mobilize my resources? So kind of that, right? You want to calculate that starting place, make a list. Here's my goal. Here's where I'm starting at. I know how to ride a bike. You can start that simple, right? But make a list, take credit for your head. Build your mobilization list. I can hire a coach. I can get a training plan. I can get a better bike. That one's really important because you can always have one better bike. But take time before you begin to lay it all out in X's and O's. What are the resources that are out there? A lot of times we don't know what we don't know when we set out for help and goals. Do a little time researching the resources that. Then finally, trust in your abilities. Like, this goes back to what Rebecca was saying, confidence begets confidence, right? There is part of it where that's internal. Make a list of the things that you will do well, that you have strengths for in these areas, and lean into your strengths, right? Rely on those strengths. We become so victim in this idea of building this motivational capital that we tend to lean into our weaknesses. We want to hear they resonate because it's that doubt starts going, right? So make a list of your abilities and strengths, lean into them. These are 3 little great points as you begin to say, and it's like, wow, where am I at with my motivational capital? This is part of your evaluation. And maybe as you kind of do where you're at, you ask yourself, where do I need to be? And then if you start making your list, what you're going to learn is suddenly is like, oh, wait, I could do this better. Yeah, I always do that better. I can do that better. That's where you begin to find that self-motivation that will lead to the right actions. Hope, we build confidence. Confidence leads to hope, right? So I'm going to tell you a little story here. I love this analogy. So hope means to see a path to obtain your goals and have the willpower to follow your path. So there's a book. This is one of my favorite light reading books in the area of motivation. It's called The Third Door. But I like it because it's a great way, and I see it with so many people right now that I want to become a third door. Like, I need to do a whole presentation, a webinar. I'll become an evangelist out there. And what this gentleman says, he's actually was a young guy. I think he was like 21 years old. He met Bill Gates, and Bill Gates said, go take a couple of years. He wanted to know what made Bill Gates and business success tick. He said, here, take a couple of years, go out and find out my answers. Sent him out in the world and said, live the dream for 5 years, figure it out. So as a 21-year-old kid, he was traveling around the world, looking at things, dating myself, looking at things. And he finally came back and he wrote the book called The Third Door. And his premise was this: because he was 21, 22 years old, he went to all these places and he was always trying to get in nightclubs. The coolest thing in the world. He had some money. He had this ability to travel. He was living kind of the rock style environment. And he came back and he said, when it comes to getting in his book is about, when it comes to getting into these cool, really cool nightclubs, there's 3 doors. But most people tend to think of only 2 doors. And here's the 2 doors that most people think of. There's door number 1, where you stand in line and you hope that someday the line moves forward enough and you get into the nightclub. And that's door number 1. And door number 2 is the VIP line. Billionaires, celebrities, movie stars, they roll in, right? And those are the 2 ways you get into these high exclusive clubs. And that's how we see it, because what we're really seeing is that either you're born into it, you're born into money, you have your billion, you're a celebrity, and you just get it because you've been born into it, or like everybody else, you stand in line and you wait and you hope to get lucky. And that's the way I see a lot of people go after goals more and more now. And I think part of that is whatever, I'm going to get into that. The third door is the secret. And the third door is get your ass out of that line, walk around that building, find windows, knock on them, see if you can get in, find back doors, knock on them. Don't give up. Find the third door. And if you try hard enough, you'll get in that club. but you have to get out of line. You have to accept the fact that you're not born with it, right? You're not a movie star, you're not a celebrity, and find your third door. And hope begins to build in us when we say, I can find it. Because otherwise than that, you know what kills? Hope dies on the vine of standing in line and you hope to get lucky to get into the club, right? You have to take action. You have to seize your opportunities to move forward.
I was just going to say that, Tim, it's action oriented. It's not standing there waiting for something to happen. It's actually taking action and moving and finding another way, being adaptable, but pushing in the back door.
How many people do you know that like next year, I'm going to do that big event? I'm finally going to chase my, they're standing in line, hoping to get in. Don't be that. The second way, again, it's kind of trying to give you a more intrinsic and then a more extrinsic is spend some time studying your past, right? Looking at your past, and I said this like to Rebecca, she had that great picture a couple of slides ago of her winning Leadville. And if you want to understand and reconnect with hope and help your hope capital planning, remember moments like that. Like I said to her the first time, Rebecca, and you were rolling into town and you come onto Main Street and you see and you knew you had it. Even just saying that gives you a little of the chills, right? Like I'm thinking about it like, oh, that would be amazing. Spend some time there when you're rating your hope capital, because remember what it feels like. Touch with those emotions again, because it will help you figure out, it will help reinvigorate that part. So when we think about that, right, hope, as we begin to build on this, here's 3 challenges, 3 things you can think about on your sheet. 1, this is not a typo, refrain future failure. The reason you don't get out of line, you don't find your third door, is you look at the future and say, I'll never get in anyway. If I knock on the back door, no one's going to answer. If I knock on a window, no one's going to open it and let me in. Refrain your future failure. And that's really about committing to growth, because you can keep standing in line, or you can reframe that and be more hopeful, more opportunistic. Next, cheer yourself. Part of why you look back at the past, connect with those emotions. When you begin to build the confidence, you have your plan, you're building this way forward, right? You need to structure and celebrate little milestones. And the reality is, a lot of times we look at a big plan. I want to go from what I'm doing now to something way up here. And that's what all training is, by the way. You're here. You want to be here. There's a series of behaviors you need to do to make the gap. Learn to reward yourself along the way. We get so locked into, and at times it is effective, into negative reinforcement. You know, that time on the bike, that moment when you're only talking to yourself and you're struggling to do that 4th interval, and you're like, you suck. You're just like, come on, you. Like every once in a while that works, but that's a trap. You know, it really is. So if you find and structure into your motivational habits wins, and you celebrate those wins, even if they're small, and you give yourself credit for, that's powerful.
It's an important concept that's called reframing, different than refrain. Reframing.
I said that, didn't I?
Yeah, reframe how you speak to yourself. And people would be like, I suck at downhills. Well, you could just say, I'm working on getting better at downhills. It's something as simple as that. And you think, well, that's dumb. I don't really believe it. But again, the neurochemicals released when you reframe something and say it positively versus negatively, your whole body responds in a way that is, your mind and your body responds. So cheering for yourself is really hard. We do not do it enough. So yeah, that's a really good one, Tim.
And then finally, a simple one, I'll speed it up. Create your if-then plan. Like when you're building your plan, the way you're going to, because this helps hope. Because how many times you start down a plan and something goes wrong? Like, man, as part of my training, I'm going to go to my local gym 3 days a week. They have all the perfect setup, everything I need. And then 4 weeks into your plan, the pandemic hits and the gym closes down. And then you're like, oh, what am I going to do? So always don't succumb to that. Have the if then, well, if my gym closes down, I'm going to use a home gym. I have workup plans B. So part of your planning, part of your thinking about it is we are incredibly good at solving problems unless we lose confidence and hope. And if we lose confidence and hopes, we actually get really bad at solving problems because we just go, okay, can't figure that one out. So think about your planning, have what ifs, if then plans. All right, and finally, and this one's a little shorter. Optimism is believing in positive events and tends to happen because of internal reasons and bad because of external reasons, right? This is two parts. We're going to talk about this as a whole. You have to have leniency for the past. You need to reframe, reframe your past and say, I failed a lot. I will tell you right now, and I've said this publicly 100 times, the best thing about coaching that I've ever done is failed a lot. I mean, I've messed up a lot of athletes. No offense. Hope if you're watching now, sorry. But the reality is, even if something as important as that, right, is, and that's hard. When you're a coach and you have athletes and you care about them, you want to learn about coaching, sit there with an athlete who for 4 years has been working for their greatest dream and they fail. And you're responsible for that. And you have to be in there at the moment, right? That's tough. But you have to learn all that tough. You reframe that. Be lenient on yourself. Lean into the learning, right? But be easy on the person. That's like, yeah, I need to learn from that, but don't crush yourself on it. So leniency on the past. And as I said before about like reframing our future view, you've got to look, you got to frame the future as filled with opportunity. Particularly in today's world, I'll give you the only 2-second current environment speech. It's harder than ever to frame our future right now as opportunity. Because you know what we've got to do? We've got to face down fear. Fear, so many times, and I'd love to do that RPI, but I can't do it. I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? And that's why I love, go right back to Rebecca's why. It was #1 question. What are you scared of? If you can't identify what you're scared of and you can't face that fear, you cannot reframe your future as opportunity. You just have fear filled. Oh, everything's going to go wrong. I'll get stuck. I won't finish. I'll be the last person. How many times have I heard that? Oh, my only training goal is to not be the last person. Screw that. Be middle of the pack. Get your ass out of line, knock on some windows and do what you're capable of doing. Let go of that future fear and see it with opportunity. Mm-hmm. And as we look at this last step in capital, right, this is such a magic piece of, and you hear this all the time from performance athletes, you got to be in the now, right? Like you got to be in the now. And that is great. Appreciate the now is the outgrowth of leniency and opportunity. Meaning you can't live in the now. If you're damning yourself for your past and you're fearing your future, your now kind of sucks. You know, I don't mean it like negative, like you're every day like miserable, but from a performance athlete, your ability to engage in goals and to build motivation. If you can't reframe and forgive your past and turn failure into lesson, into growth, and you can't look at the future and say, okay, I'm nervous, but I can put aside fear and see opportunity, you never live in the now. Because you're always in past or future. You're always stressing about one of those two. When you put them in their right place, that's why confidence leads to hope. Confidence and hope leads to optimism. Put those together and you will find high abilities of motivation. It'll translate to behavior. Willpower will align with way power and help you achieve your goals.
That's really good, Tim. I love that. So now we're back to the menu. Okay, so you understand the concepts, and this is where you're going to build that nice menu with lots more dishes on it than are shown here. So Tim, how does somebody go and start to build their motivation menu?
So we already kind of said it pretty well, right? And Rebecca says it right. It should be, we're not saying fill in the X's and O's. You need to spend time, think about your why, identify these, right? Expand on it, challenge your thinking. What are you curious? What are you afraid of? What are you, if you don't go through your motivational menu and build it out the first time, then walk away from it for a day and come back and say, okay, now I'm going to read it again. And can I add, can I think, can I keep stacking things from the buffet? You know, and after a day's gone by, I'm looking at my why, I'm not really being honest with myself. And here's maybe some behavioral thing, and here's some elements I need. So it's like we consider doing a fancy worksheet with fill in this block and answer this question, and here's a drop-down menu. But to be honest with you, go back to my first point. We can't motivate you. I can't motivate an athlete. And if you can't skip the process and just arrive at motivation, and the process that attendee number 1 versus attendee number 6 versus attendee number 50 on this webinar go through are not going to be the same, because it's an interlook, right? It's introspection. It's what are my goals? It's what are those whys? We're all going to be different. What I would recommend is to accomplish it, plan some time with you. It's so funny, like open your calendar right now. So many people work, when professional, we're always running around busy, and you have a bunch of listings on your calendar. Where on your calendar right now do you have, oh, time for me? Bet you really don't. So put time somewhere. Put 3 1-hour sessions to figure out my why, build my plan for the future, and find my motivation by analyzing my motivational capital. Then have the tools, this webinar, that worksheet, read, share, Google, whatever, learn some more before you, Rebecca, we're 2 people who have done this for a while, but there's plenty of great learning and good stuff out there, and some bad, but focus on the good. And spend some time where you just shut out the distractions and think. That's really hard for us to do now, because you spend like 3 minutes shutting out the distractions. Then it's like, oh wait, no, I'm gonna put that down, right? Then 3 minutes, leave your cell phone in a can in the basement, give it to your dog and let your dog bury it in the backyard, shut off all the technology and just think.
Yeah, and even on a long ride, or your next time outside, is maybe don't have headphones or a podcast. Or I do a lot of my thinking quietly while I'm out moving as well, a bit of a moving meditation. So that's another good little tool. I think where we want to go now is we want to just give you some examples from decades of our experience of, you understand the why and the goal, moving from way power to willpower. But honestly, often it is these small daily habits that start to move you in the right direction. And you may think, I want to ride the Iditarod Trail. As an example, we'll put that out there. Okay, I'm going to ride 350 miles through Alaska in the winter. I don't have the skill for it. I'm terrified of it. I don't have the right clothes. I'm not trained for it. That is so big. How do I even get there? And it comes back to the small daily habits. And so we're going to share some of ours. And we're running a little long. I hope you guys are fine with that. We're going to stay on here and get through this. We're going to share some of ours. I'm going to encourage you to share some of yours, because like I said, that buffet needs to be big, and you need to be able to put a lot of things on it and learn something from somebody else. What works for you? That's your reflection. What works for Tim? Like, oh, I never tried that. That's kind of cool. I'm going to do that. So, I'm going to just go through some of the habits that, your goal might seem really far away, but it really does start right now. It starts with you attending here, which is amazing. Congratulations. And it's all those little things that add up. Nobody got a master's degree in one day. Nobody became a world champion in one day. And it's lots of little habits. And as Tim said, it's a snowball effect. You start doing one good habit and then another, and then you feel good, and bing, you get that dopamine release of like, oh, that felt good. Yay, me. I'm doing a good job. And then all of a sudden that starts, your brain chemicals start feeding on itself. So here's, and I'll let you in. Yeah, I'm a world champion. I've been an athlete a long time. I need to always pull on motivation. I don't wake up like my dog every day, just like, yes, let's go outside. Let's do anything, 0 to 60, any moment. We're not like that. And the simplicity of the dog, I call it the Tao of the dog. Yeah, they kind of got it figured out, but our brains get in the way. So sometimes we need to make some more tools. So I'll just quickly share a few of mine. If you want to take them, you can. So one is removing barriers and excuses. A big part is making sure your equipment's ready. And so this is a fire department thing. After you've gone on the fire department and the engine, you bring it back, and you've had this great fire, you saved a cat, whatever it was, you put the engine back in service for the next time. You don't just like pull it in dirty and high five and your equipment's all laying all over the floor. You put it back in service because you want to be ready for that next call, that next thing. And so this is a big one for me. If my equipment is ready, it's clean, it's in the right place, it's labeled. I use a label maker. I put my shoes in the right place. I plug my Garmin in at the end of my ride. I make sure that things are ready so that if I am kind of not motivated the next day, there isn't an excuse of, oh, well, my tires aren't pumped up, my Garmin's not charged, my this isn't that, my that isn't that. And so when you're sort of feeling high and the adrenaline's high, you got all those good neurochemicals going at the end of your workout, put everything back in order so that your equipment is ready. There's no excuses. This is also removing a barrier of time. Put it on the schedule. Like Tim said, I'm doing my workout from this time to this time. Tell your family, let them know, put it on your work schedule. Accountability. This is signing up for stuff where people, you're meeting a friend at 8 o'clock and they're like, okay, if you're not there, that is very motivating. And sticking to it. I have a 20-minute rule when I don't feel like going out, which is, maybe 50% of the time, sometimes more. It's like, oh, it's cold. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I'm not motivated. I have a 20-minute rule, and this is very tied to neurochemicals and endorphins. And I tell myself, okay, I'm going to go out for 20 minutes. And if I'm still not feeling it, I'll turn around and come home, and I forgive myself if that happens. And I'm like, okay. And if I really do need a rest day, okay. But I go out for 20 minutes, and what magically happens about that time is you're warmed up, you're away from technology, and your neurochemicals, endorphins start to be released, and suddenly you feel good and you're like, man, I feel good. Okay, I'm out riding. And a lot of us can relate to that in like the first 15 minutes or so of a ride. Your noises brains, your brain is really noisy of like, oh, I should be at work, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, I gotta go to the grocery store, I gotta do that. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, it's really pretty out. And that is, wow, it's a beautiful fall day. And that is your neurochemicals boink,
Mhm.
flipping over. And it takes about 20 minutes. So I have a 20-minute rule. And if I have to turn around and go home and say, I need a rest day, it's like, okay, I went out, I did my 20 minutes. Okay. 80% rule is very similar. I've been a professional athlete for a long time. I get these coaching schedules and I'm supposed to do all of the things on the schedule. And I have this rule that if I am 80%, 100% of the time, that's good enough to win a world championship, or many of them. So if you do most of the work 100% of the time, you're going to get to your goal. Nobody is 100%. And so you've got a little bit of a buffer room, but the key to that is that you're 80%, 100% of the time. So you're consistent, you're showing up. You may not do it exactly perfectly. It may have said, go ride for an hour and a half and you rode for an hour and 15. Okay, good enough. It really is. But you're going to get back there the next day and do at least 80%. High hard goal, that is also scientifically proven. You put something scary and big and intimidating out there, that is very motivating. That is something to put on your motivational menu. And the next one I have is eat the elephant, or Lao Tzu. So if you're going to eat an elephant, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, small baby steps. Or the philosopher said, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. That might be the better way of saying eat an elephant one bite at a time. But same thing, baby steps. It really is. And celebrate the baby steps. Variety, choice, diversity. This is really important for me. I Nordic ski, I run, I hike, I bike, I walk my dogs, I shovel snow, I chop wood, because sometimes the weather isn't conducive. I have an indoor trainer set up. I've got a little home gym set up. I've got a lot of things to choose from, because sometimes things just don't fall in your favor, or it's dark, or I work too late, and okay, I'm going to jump on my trainer, I didn't get outside. Have a lot of choices so that you have variety, diversity. And if you're just like, I'm sick of riding this bike, we'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to go for a ski. And yes, you need to be sort of focused on the type of goal you're going towards, but having a little variety, a little spice of life, I think is one, it's really healthy mentally, and it's really healthy physically for just your overall stature and your musculature and all those kinds of things. Communication, this is telling your friends, this is my goal. I'm going to go do a workout on Saturday. Do you want to come with me? Or say, hey, I'm struggling. Can you help me with this? And this is where a community is really important. Like, man, I really failed and I don't know what to do. Admitting some of that stuff is really powerful, because guaranteed someone's going to come and be like, I can help you with that. So communicating the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, letting somebody know in your community. Distraction tools. So these are things like podcasts, music, sometimes the stuff where you just, need something else to occupy your brain because your brain is too busy going, I don't want to do this. I'm tired. I suck. I'm terrible. And so you put something else in there that's like, okay, well, at least I'm going to learn about something while I'm riding my bike today, or, putting on, Netflix or whatever it is. The opposite of that is focus tools. And so I'm not one to always ride with a podcast, or this is again that motivation menu. Sometimes I need a distraction tool. Sometimes I don't want it. And I want the focus tool. And I want to see how many miles per hour am I going right now? How many miles have I gone? How far to that next hill? And those are things where I'm just like, what is my heart rate? And those are kind of bringing me inside, to like thinking about myself. Or the distraction tool sometimes I need when I don't want to think about the pain in my legs or what my heart rate's doing, but other times I do want to think about those things. So those are just kind of some of my motivation menu. Friends, very important to have community as part. And again, I ride alone a lot, but sometimes I like to ride with people. Even if we start out together and we're different paces and then we meet at the top of the hill, you don't have to worry if someone's not your pace. It's totally okay. So those are some of my menu items. Feel free to add them to your buffet. And I will encourage all of you after we leave this to share some of your motivational habits, because it's really great to share these things. And it's how you move from what you think you should do to actually doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Way power to willpower, closing that gap, like Tim said, from knowing what you should do to actually doing it. And that really is the key to motivation, are these little daily habits. So Tim, your turn. What are your habits that you want to share?
So I have the rule of one. There's a great book. It's by Peter Clear called that. So that I and my little list is a number one in these fonts. So here it is, right? Each day, look at one habit and try to improve it. One habit. Remember what I wrote as willpower, behavior that's goal orientated, that gets you closer to your goal. One day, one habit, 1%. And what I mean by 1% is you don't need to accomplish something huge. You don't need to have this big victory every day. Incremental gains. One habit, 1% improvement, 1% closer. An example I use, I was talking about with Rebecca this afternoon. I have a young pro athlete and he's all fired up to lose some weight. And he was like, this year in the off season, I'm going to go from training full bore. And as soon as I'm done, I'm going to diet and I'm going to cut my weight down. And, he's eating about 4,000, 4,500 calories a day, with training and stuff like that. And off season, he was like, I'm going to cut right down to 1,500. And like season ended, he rested for like 2 days. And then he's like, bam, he cuts to 1,500. I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you next week. Let's see how this goes. Get on a meeting next week. I'm like, how'd that work out? He's like, dude, I didn't last 2 days because too big, right? Too much of a jump. So one day, one habit, 1%, one result. The rule of one is an excellent way to change behaviors. Just a little bit at a time. You go back to eat the elephant, right? If you have gone through you've built your why, you have your goal, you've thought about your motivational capital, and you're like, man, I always lose hope, or I struggle with optimism, or I don't have these capital elements. Build things that translate. It means your willpower is going to lose out and you won't achieve your way power, right? You won't be able to follow the plan, the path, the way. One day, one habit, 1%, one result. Little incremental gains. That's really, honestly, the key to high motivation. You have to translate it to action. Too much burns up too much motivation too quickly. None or backwards, motivation dies on the vine. One day, one habit, 1%, one result.
It is small. And I think we think that it's got to be this big thing. And we're just like, I'll just do a little better, this little tiny bit better. And that really does begin to snowball. And then that really fuels your motivation. It fuels the neurochemicals, and it really just does start to happen. So you've taken that one big step right here tonight, which is amazing being here. And so what we want to wrap with, here's how we want to wrap, is one, by saying thank you for being here at Rusch Academy. It's so fun. Tim and I love doing this. It's so fun to sit and talk to you about this stuff and go through it ourselves, because we're still working on it too. And so I'm going to ask you to share, well, one, we'll take some questions if you want, but also share your motivation menu items, because I'm always looking for more stuff to put in my buffet. So we'd love to have you share that with us. We hope you'll join us for more learning. And we're going to do questions on social media too. So I want to ask you, encourage you to follow us on social media, join Basecamp and Rebecca Rusch. And in closing, we want to give you a couple tools to really set you on the right motivational path. So we talked about way power, having a plan. So Basecamp is a 16-week program. We start the end of the month, where Coach Tim and we train with you along with a bunch of other world-class coaches. It's a cycling program. It's a community-based program. We train together on the bike, indoor, outdoor, and it's pretty cool. And it's one of my biggest motivational things that I do. It really helps me over the winter to have that community. So there's a plan, there is a community, there's a way to ask questions, there's a way to share and communicate the highs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So $50 off if you want to use that code. We'll send you this stuff too in the wrap up. But then also you can join us for Sun Valley, Rebecca's Private Idaho. Set a goal for next Labor Day weekend, so that it's on your calendar, you're ready to go. Again, you've got 15% off. And I just really want to, I want to say thanks to Tim. Basecamp is a sponsor of Rusch Academy, makes it possible. So are Live and Giant, Garmin, and Envy. And mostly I want to say thanks to you for leaning in and really starting your journey of achieving your next goals. So Tim, do we have any questions we need to address right now? And this is open forum. If you do have questions you want, Kirby says, can't wait for RPI 23. My goal is to cut an hour off my time. Awesome.
That's
Great
awesome.
goal. Hopefully you've got your why, you've got your process, and we'll be following your journey along with that. And Tim, do you have anything to wrap the evening for everyone?
No, I think that's great.
Oh, wait, I was going to ask you your favorite motivational quote. That's right.
It's so funny. That's right. I meant to spend time thinking about that, but then we got distracted into other things. So you might have me on the spot. Let's see. I didn't think about it.
No worries. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll share one of my favorite motivational quotes, and then I'm going to ask all of you to share some of your motivation menu items. What are your little daily habits, your tips and tricks that help get you out the door when you're not motivated? So we can add those to our buffet. And then what are your favorite motivational quotes? And I'll wrap with sharing one of mine. It's by Ernest Hemingway, who I live in Idaho. Ernest Hemingway lived and died here and has a long history here. And one of my favorite quotes of his is, the world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong in the broken places. So here's to resilience and willpower and way power and building your full motivation menu. And thank you for being here. Be good.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.